We're so proud to have two former Detroiters who have come home in different ways joining us this morning for a conversation about their story. Delane Parnell spoke in 2019. He is the founder of PlayVS, an esports company based on the West Coast. But Delane has also just built a home in the Detroit area and is spending part of his time here building new companies, and while he's still building his original PlayVS, which is esports for high school and college. And the conversation will be with Mykolas Rambus, who is also an entrepreneur from Detroit, who just last week moved back to Detroit. And he is a serial entrepreneur. His first company was WealthX, which profiled very wealthy individuals around the globe. And his new company is called Hush. And it is all about privacy and trying to keep what you don't want on the internet off the internet. So please welcome Mick and Delane.
Great, thank you. So, Delane, you have a tremendously interesting story. I hear there's even a book in the works about your story. So I think we'd all love to hear how you became an entrepreneur. Take us way back.
Yeah.
It starts early.
Yeah, so good to see everybody here, by the way. So I grew up in the Jeffries Projects of Detroit, eventually moved to the west side of Detroit, 7 Mile and Burgess. And that's where I spent, most of my high school years. And my mom actually introduced me to a gentleman who owned a cell phone store. His name is Sam. And Sam took me under his wing, taught me everything about business, exposed me to entrepreneurship, being an operator, gave me a lot of opportunity to experiment. That led to me owning some cell phone stores, helped start a car rental. Went to San Francisco when I was 18 and sort of never looked back. Extremely grateful for the journey, but certainly wouldn't have happened, without that early exposure to entrepreneurship via my mom.
That's great. So by 18, you had how many businesses that you started?
Well, I started 3 cell phone stores with some partners and then a car rental with a partner.
Got it. So you were out there early. What advice would you give to aspiring youngsters who are keen, who are thinking about business and maybe they're 14, maybe they're in high school thinking about how to get started? What would you tell them?
Yeah, be patient. I think, we live in a generation where everyone wants instant gratification. Mm-hmm. Patience is probably the most important quality to have at that age.
Got it. Okay. Sage words.
Yeah.
So heading out west, PlayVS, the next story. When I hear this story of how it came to be, how did you get involved in esports and how did PlayVS get started?
Yeah, so I was working at Rocket Fiber. I was a part of the early team there, working under Mark Hudson, who was the CEO before acquisition. Or through acquisition. We had a customer support ticket come through from a guy whose son was a professional esports player, and he wanted to use our internet access to compete in a competition to give himself an advantage. And our VP of customer support said, hey, we have this really interesting ticket, you should take a look at it. Mark and I historically had played video games. Everyone had known at the company that we were gamers. I met the person, was exposed to this sort of world beyond the layer of just normal in-game, competition, and fell in love with the space. Had, built a team, sold that team, left Rocket Fiber, started to, build products within the space, and eventually met Peter Pham, who's a co-founder of Science. And Science is an incubator as well as a venture fund based in LA. And Peter convinced me to move to LA to build PlayVS, and so that's essentially the origin story.
Got it. Okay, great. There might be folks in this room who are either small business owners or thinking about starting a new organization, and often it's said the hardest part about starting that new business is making the decision to do it, right? To jump off that ledge. Can you tell us about your personal decision in making that jump?
Yeah, I was dragging my feet quite a bit, not necessarily to build anything, but to leave Detroit to build something. And, Peter called me, actually, I remember pretty vividly. We were at a Cavs game, and myself and Hodge Flemings, who's here, and Peter said, you can be a millionaire in Detroit or a billionaire in LA. Like, it's your choice. He's like, don't waste my time. I was like, well, that's easy. And so And so yeah, so it was certainly left that game literally. It was in the middle of the week. By Saturday, I was in LA, and essentially sacrificed everything to go. And it was a tough, I'd say, first 6 or 7 months transitioning. I spent 24/7 just working. I'd even replicated my office at their building in my living room, so I had like no living room furniture. But it certainly paid off, and so I'm thankful for the opportunity. And LA was the sort of perfect ecosystem for our business, given the gaming culture there.
That's great. So early days, what was PlayVS like? I mean, it's grown a lot. You have a few hundred employees these days, and we'll talk about fundraising in a minute. But tell us about the early days.
Yeah. So I mean, we're still in the early days, I'd say. So we're 3.5 years old, going into our 4th year this upcoming January. The business, PlayVS, is best described as a platform for high school and college stage gamers. We power. It's also the only place, by the way, where competing in esports qualifies as a varsity athletic in U.S. high schools and Canadian high schools. We power high schools for the NFHS and most state associations across the country. The NFHS governs all high school sports, much like the NCAA. In fact, they're across the street, like in the same office from the NCAA. They've been for the past 100 years. And yeah, like, the business is grown. We're entering our 7th season. Where playing video games or esports is a varsity athletic in most high schools, and we're excited about the growth. We're 120 people now, up from 0 essentially 3.5 years ago. We have partnerships with most game publishers, exclusively in some cases, like Riot Games, which is League of Legends, Nintendo, which is the first time Nintendo's ever done anything of this sort, Epic, Fortnite. And we have a bunch of other deals in the pipe. We've sanctioned esports, where it's recognized just like football, basketball, et cetera, in 24 states, including California, Georgia, Alabama, Massachusetts, which is really exciting because, kids get an opportunity to earn a varsity letter or to see a banner go up when they win a championship that sits right next to the football state championship banner. They are able to be placed in the record books for their state whenever they, have some massive achievement, and just be recognized for their passion and talents. And so we're excited about the future of what we're building, not only in just the scholastic market, but beyond that. But I think the thing that gets us most amped up is the impact that we have on kids. Esports offers an opportunity far beyond student engagement. It gives kids an opportunity to get more connected to STEM. Most schools have computer labs, but they go, underutilized in most cases because there's not enough curriculum to actually, get kids to stay after school and use that equipment that's there. And so esports gives them an opportunity to do so while building community and also competing, something that, most kids really enjoy doing. And so, we're reaching all sorts of kids. We actually just announced a partnership with the Special Olympics. And so we're introducing the Unified League next year. We, in fact, had a kid recently with no arms who played League of Legends on a modified keyboard using his feet next to a baseball player that's going Division I next year. And so imagine that kind of unlikely friendship form via esports, because esports existed on that school's campus. And so there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in that scene.
That's, to say the least, right? It seems like esports is one of the hottest sectors to be in these days. We'll hear from Meg Whitman a little later on, who's an investor in an esports company as well. A lot happening around Detroit in esports too. Yeah. And so give us your sense of where the market's going, right? You're here early stage. What's the next 5, even 10 years look like for esports? I
think esports is a really complex market, first off. I think it's easy to bucket everything under sort of one industry size and our scopes. I think building a team is certainly one thing. There are a lot of really exciting teams. Dan is actually an investor and partner in 100 Thieves, which I think is the best esports organization by far. And so I think that's an opportunity to build, significant wealth and then also redistribute that wealth back into the community, which I'm really excited about. We're on the platform side. And so the platform side is even more earlier than building a team or an organization that can benefit from sponsorship revenue. We're trying to build at PlayVS a layer on top of the in-game experience. And so we want people to use our website to essentially programmatically compete in matches with some context behind them. And in our case today, like that context is playing on behalf of your school, whether it be a high school or college. The challenge in the space, which is one of the reasons I say PlayVS has been so successful, is that if you're building a company, a platform on top of an in-game experience. You're a third party, and you have to acquire those rights to do so from game publishers. It's much like what Spotify had to do early on by partnering with record labels and publishing houses. And that's a really difficult challenge. We're going and sitting and talking to Activision Blizzard or Epic or Riot, these multi-billion-dollar companies who, frankly, don't necessarily care about the work that we're doing. At least it's not in their, initial strategic plans. And we have to convince them to care, convince them to dedicate resourcing via talent, technology, capital to support our initiative. And in most cases, we're saying without rev share. And so, it's been, and then, in addition, they have the biggest ask from us isn't just acquiring those commercial rights, but then building the technology to help enable this experience. And so that's the scarcest resource in our market. I think as the industry itself progresses and more of those deals happen and more technology is built to actually enable a lot of the experiences that third-party platforms in the esports ecosystem are capable of building, I think we'll see an even larger explosion of growth. I'm fortunate that PlayVS is the company spearheading that. We're the first company, third party, including, Twitch, frankly, to have made partnerships with all of the large publishers and on favorable terms and likely exclusive for the most part. And so, I think that, in the next few years, we'll see even more of that and the industry will grow because of it.
Mm-hmm. That's a ton of opportunity, like you said.
Yeah.
So clearly your company has executed well, right? Investors have said so based on the amount of money you've raised. You've raised a pretty good sum. Can you tell us about that and what it's taken to raise that amount of money?
Well, I'll tell you, if we started the company last year, up until this point, we would have raised $500 million. Who knows? The markets are crazy now, but yeah. So I started the company January 2018. Probably 18 months post that, we raised about 107 million from some really amazing investors.
170.
Yeah, 107. Yeah. And so we raised an A, B, and C, right after another. We raised from NEA, Rick Yang at NEA, who's the head of consumer. We raised from Battery Ventures, from Roger Lee, from Dick Costolo, who's a Michigan man, former CEO of Twitter, Cotu, SoftBank, Raul Mehta from DST. So a bunch of tier one, legendary, iconic investors. And so to have that sort of support, people who've invested in some of the largest, most impactful internet businesses of our time, say that this is the esports, this is the gaming business that they want to be involved in. It's certainly a lot of validation, and we get a ton of support from that. And our goal is hopefully to build enough value long term to be able to return some of that value as thanks to their early support.
Great. So I hear you're living here as well as LA, right? And so I want to ask you about some of the other investments you're looking at and the other projects you're involved with here in Detroit. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, so I'm primarily in LA, but over the past 18 months or so during the COVID period, I built a house here, and so I've been spending a little bit more time here while we're remote. We're going back in January though, hopefully, and so I'll primarily be in LA at that point. But yeah, I'm super excited about the growth of the Detroit startup community, even what you're doing with Hush now, formerly Privacy Check. I'm a venture partner at Detroit Venture Partners, so making happy to be a part of that investment team with Jake Cohen. Spearheading investments and helping build companies here downtown Detroit. I'm also working on a new venture called MSRP, which I think the best way to describe it is as a next-gen holding company that acquires and builds direct-to-consumer brands. The name MSRP is actually a nod to manufacturer suggested retail price, which was a statute that the government introduced as price protection for small businesses competing against larger businesses. It's of my mind to think that, Black culture has suffered economic exploitation for centuries, and it needs similar value protection. And so, our goal is to build companies that one day look like Skims, Yeezy, Beats by Dre under a single portfolio, but that are culture owned, Black owned, and that pay fair wages to talent that, larger, mostly, white corporations who currently sort of exploit and leverage Black talent without acknowledging this impact to its bottom line, pay.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. So you have a lot going on, to say the least.
And just working.
Yeah, great. We've got a few minutes left. I want to see if we can get questions from the audience. Sure. While we have the time. Back there, please. I'm going to repeat the question just so the folks in the live stream can hear it as well. What do you say to the young folks in Detroit who are looking to get perhaps in the same field, but don't quite yet know how?
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing that was most helpful for me was that I would go to events and I just talk to everyone. So, you know, the first event that I went to, I actually traveled there with the Up2 founders who actually are now the founders of StockX. So Greg Swartz, Chris Kaufman. We went to San Francisco to the launch festival, and there were thousands of people there. I literally, for 4 or 5 days, talked to every single person. And, you know, I would get every single person's business card. That's when people exchange business cards. I would write, you know, information from the conversation down on the back of the business card. And then that night, because I was only 18, I would just follow up with everybody. And so then the next day, you know, we have an even better experience when we conversed, because, you know, I followed up and they were really impressed with that follow through. And so, look, I'd say, don't be afraid to network. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Follow up and follow through. Is some of the best advice that I can give people.
Great. Next question. And while we're waiting for that question, I wanted to share, I think everyone knows this, right? Michigan had the highest growth in VC investment last year.
Oh, awesome.
So the same folks who are thinking about starting a company, this is a great place to do it. There's capital around, but networking seems like it's a key part of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Any other questions?
So I think we're right on time.
Awesome.
Really appreciate you. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Of course.